Good morning, good afternoon, good day. Welcome to our Big Book 12-step workshop. My name is Herb. I'm an alcoholic. This call is being recorded. I'll invite you to join me in the set-aside prayer. God, please set aside everything that I think I know about myself, my unmanageability, the 12 steps in you, for an open mind and a new experience with myself, my unmanageability, the 12 steps, and especially you. Please join me in the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things that cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. So we're here today to transition into the next piece of work on step 4. We've taken a look at resentments, and now we're going to take a look at fear. Let me get back to my PowerPoints here. So just to remind us as a little context, made us searching. So this is going to be a pen and paper process. It's going to be a thought-filled process. It's going to take time. It's going to take proactiveness on our part. And fearless, interesting use of term here. Moral inventory of ourselves. We're going to be looking at a fear inventory. Moral. What are our values? What are the principles that we have that motivate us? We looked deeply at that in the resentment inventory. We saw that we needed to identify and analyze those resentments. Bill says that the root of the problem is self-centeredness, but we can't see the root because it's underground. We could say even, this isn't in the big book, but we could say it's in the unconscious, this self-centeredness. Most of us don't know it in the level of recognition that we do after we do a 4th step. And the first fruit of that root is resentment. The second is fear. We will be looking at the sex inventory next, and the final recap, looking at dishonesty and secrets and guilt and shame. Those are bullet points that I've created based on my experience, especially in trying to help the workshops round out and finish their 4th step effectively. One of the most recent PowerPoints that I've used describes what Bill says in the 12 and 12 in chapter 4, instincts gone awry. I believe we've seen this before, but again, to provide a context of where we are and where we've been. We've been looking at our fight instinct. Now we're going to look at our flight instinct. But notice it's in the survival. It's at the very basic level. Not just the survival of happiness and getting what we want and not losing what we have, but survival of our very lives. And they get translated into emotions. Our fight instinct to anger, our flight instincts to fear, our freeze, hiding, camouflage into dishonesty, which then translate into the manifestation of the emotions in the limbic system. Resentment, which is anger held. Fear, anxiety, that sense, that crippling sense of inability to deal with reality, to run. And then, of course, dishonesty, that camouflage, that hiding. Most of us experience it as shame. Most of us actually experience it in our sexual relationships. We hide our motives. We hide our beliefs, even from ourselves. And the whole point of this is to unpack it so that we determine all of the things that get in our way, those shadows, those clouds to the sunlight of the Spirit in us, to identify those obstacles and then to have them removed. And to also, and I'm sure that by now you've really gotten the flavor of the group, although there are different shades of experience. Each one of us is very human, and not one of us has very many variations from the other. And so Bill says in the fear inventory, the same thing he said in the resentment inventory. We make a list. I'm going to take a look now at the material on page 67 and 68. It gives us a bit of a warm up on 67. Notice that the word fear is bracketed alongside the difficulties with Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, the employer, and wife. We saw that on page 65 in the second column to do with the resentment inventory, the third column that has to do with the resentment inventory. It's just a word. Bill doesn't tell us what it means. He doesn't tell us how to use it. And in fact, he didn't even put it next to each of those words. We did, because that was the instruction that I got. So you've already looked at your fears in the third column. And then when we went to the fourth column, you looked at it twice, questions number 4 and questions number 8. So you've got the beginning of a list, and I'll give you some instructions in a minute. This short word somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. It was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. That's quite a picture. It's poetic. But look at the shirt that you have, or the clothes that you're wearing, or the rug on the floor, or the curtains on the windows. And look at the threads, the different colors woven in and out to give it the context, the texture, the color. That's what he's saying about fear. So deeply integrated and embedded in our very core being. Fear, set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. That has an echo of some of the comments he made in resentment, doesn't it? We stepped on the toes of others, not realizing it, but they retaliated. Did not we ourselves set the ball rolling? The insight, the turnaround that we had in the fourth column, especially, of the resentment inventory. Sometimes we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble. I have no idea what Bill means by that. It's quite a connection, fear and stealing. I'm assuming, writing in 1939, just coming out of the Depression, where goods and material things were so scarce and expensive, that stealing got to be quite an issue in people's consciousness. And he's, I think, maybe making a comparison here as to the sensitivity of people with fear and the stealing that was prevalent in the society of the time. I don't know that, but it seemed to give it some explanation. But then he gets right into the specific instructions. In fact, it's so simple that I don't even have a worksheet. I have a worksheet on resentment. I have a worksheet on the sex inventory. but I don't really have a worksheet that comes out of the big book on the fear inventory. Oh, I have a worksheet, but it comes out of my psychological background to try to help, and I'll explain that in a minute. But the fear in inventory is so simple that I don't believe I need a worksheet for that. It says we reviewed our fears thoroughly, we put them on paper. Again, step 4 is about a writing exercise. You think and then you write on paper, pen or pencil and paper, or many people have facility with typing and their laptop. I don't, so I can't make any comment about that. Even though we had no resentment in connection with them. This is a very separate exercise, even though he had connected both third and fourth column to fear. This is a very separate exercise. And I defined it in the third and fourth column exercise as the fear of not getting what we wanted or losing what we had. A pretty common definition. You may have other definitions, which I'd be very interested in hearing today. So we make the list. What I suggest that you do is do it in a spontaneous way after you pray the set-aside prayer. Just from the top of your head, from the center of your heart, from the bottom of your gut. We're looking for feelings, the feelings of fear, the feelings of running when threatened. What fears do you have? Fear of not having enough money, fear of losing a job, fear of not getting a relationship, fear of losing a relationship, fear of not losing a relationship. I mean, there's no right or wrong. There's just an emotion. Again, like anger and resentment, it's a feeling. It's not a thought. And we're not talking about a memory of a fear. Oh, I used to have a fear of driving on the freeway. No. If you don't have the fear now, then it doesn't go on the list. If it's past tense, it doesn't go on the list. Only fears, current fears, go on the list. And don't filter it. When you're doing this for the first time, after these instructions and between now and next week, just allow it to flow. Don't filter it. And it might be 10, and it might be 20, and it might be 100. It doesn't make any difference. I'm going to talk about the approach to it and shaping it here in a minute. But the first effort, allow it to be very open, without filter, without judgment. Oh, that's too small. Oh, that's too large. Oh, that's too traumatic. Or that's too embarrassing. Don't do the filter. If it comes as a consciousness, write it down. Consider it a gift of God, a gift of the Spirit, a gift of your best self, a gift of your higher self. Doesn't matter how you approach it. Allow it to be on paper, and then we'll give you some suggestions as to how to shape it and approach it. That very first instruction is make a list. Here's the second instruction. And it's the last instruction in the big book. We asked ourselves why we had it. So why do you have it? One word, 3 words, a phrase, not a paragraph. This is not therapy. This is not catharsis. This is not a time for a dump of your feelings, at least in this exercise. If you have a want or a need to dump, write a paragraph, write a thesis on whatever the subject of the fear is. Do that on a separate piece of paper. It might be quite therapeutic and cathartic, but that's not the point here. That's a wonderful personal development or psychological exercise, but it's not relevant here. Be as crisp in it as you were in the second column of the resentment inventory. Take a look at that second column. It's about anger, but how crisp? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words, 7 at the most, I believe. Well, that's a guideline. I don't have rules. And it's not in the big book. I'm just observing the second column in the resentment inventory and suggesting that you follow that as a model. Why do you have it? That's it. That's the fear inventory. Now I'm going to make two more comments, not in the big book, but from my experience. Number one, when I did that the first time, I got some information. I saw fears that I never realized I had, but I didn't see the full picture of the fears. This man who took me through the work the second time said, write down in that second column why you had that fear, and then take a look at it and ask yourself, what fear does that bring up? What's underneath that fear? What fear's underneath that fear? And when you write that down, pause a minute and write down what fear's underneath that fear, and what fear's underneath the next fear, and what fear's underneath the next iteration. An example of a very simple fear. This is not my fear. It's just an example to give some clarification to these instructions. Let's assume that I say, I didn't, but let's assume that I say I had a fear of German Shepherd dogs. Wow. All right. Why do I have that? And then I remember at age 7, totally fictitious, but at age 7, I was attacked and had to go to the hospital and have 25 stitches because of this experience. Oh, and then I understand why I have that fear. It was a trauma that I can identify. That's the end of it. But here's a real fear that I had to unpack. I have a fear of honesty. I had it. I don't have it, or I don't have it as much anymore. But in 1991, when I was doing this work for the second time, this man gave me this instruction for the very first time to get down underneath. Bill asks us to get to the exact nature, the causes and conditions, the facts. So he's amplifying, like he did with the third column, giving an extended third column, not in the big book, but comes from his experience of stretching it. I had a fear of dishonesty. Well, why do I have a fear of, honesty? I have a fear of honesty because if I tell you what I'm thinking, then you're going to make up your own mind about who I am. You're going to make up your own mind as to who I am and how I'm constructed, what my personality and my principles are, what my character's like. Well, why is it important for me then not to reveal that to you? Why do I have a fear of honesty? Well, then I get to the next level, because if you see me as I really am, you won't like me. Well, what's underneath that fear? If you don't like me, I won't be part of the community. If you don't like me, I won't get what I want. If you don't like me, I'll lose what I have. I mean, there's many, many answers to that, and I can keep going. Well, if you see who I am, then I can't get the value from you that I want to get. I want you to think that I'm a superior, intelligent, well-educated person. And if I start telling you exactly what I think and feel and am doing, or realistically what my background is, you'll know exactly who I am. All right, so then I can go down and get underneath and get underneath and get underneath to the exact fear that I won't get what I want. I won't achieve what I want. I won't have the money that I want. I won't have the power I want. I won't get the prestige that I want. When I did that in hand in glove with the therapy I was receiving was very helpful to understand the quirks in my personality, which I had never seen that narcissism that I frequently refer to, and we'll explore much more deeply when we get to the 6th step. Not that it's relevant to the big book work, but it was revealed to me by the big book work in combination with other personal work that I was doing, which allowed me then to begin to deal with it. Once I was able to name it, see it, and accept it, I have a fear of tall men. I have a fear of good-looking, articulate women. This was back in the day, 1991. All right. This began to reveal to me some of the reasons that I drank in social gatherings to sort of tranquilize that tension that was in me that I didn't know was in me. The second observation I want to make outside of the big book is that in the Way of Life document, and you can take a look at it on your own time right now, I'm not going to spend any time on it, but I want to make you aware of it and explain why it's there. Page 26 in the Way of Life document, as I said, I don't have a worksheet on fear that comes from the big book. That worksheet doesn't come from the big book. That comes from my human development background, my psychology background. And it's for work later on. It's optional, totally optional. And we'll talk about it at another time. But what I'm saying is it's there. It's not from the big book. It's totally optional. We'll talk about it later, maybe next week. We'll talk about it next week. But it's, from my standpoint, the purpose of it was to help. So I have a fear and I understand why I have it. So what? What can I do with that? All right. Well, certainly we go to the 5th step with that, but I want some resolution. And so just like in the 4th column of the resentment inventory where we had the turnaround, because we saw the truth, I wanted to see what the virtue is and what the behavior would be if I didn't have the fear, so that I can have that as my target, as my vision, as my sort of, those are the things that I can attempt to bring into my life by my effort and in prayer, of course, and in accountability with a sponsor. So again, more about that later. Page 68. So that second suggestion, we asked ourselves why we had these fears. Bill continues. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Wow, that's pretty accurate. It's pretty wise. It's very glib, but it's totally accurate. Self-reliance. Oh, I really know how unreliable I am. I'm not smart enough. I'm not educated enough. I'm not tough enough. I'm not fast enough. By my experience standards around me, to actually maintain the existence that I want. That's why I create the false self, that persona, that mask that I've talked about and that I showed in the exhibit there with instincts. That Hollywood storefront that we all have, that's begun now to be deconstructed with that 3rd and 4th column of the resentment inventory. Those were tools of a wrecking ball coming in to knock down the cinder block walls that we've built in the beginning to protect ourselves, that we don't actually realize that we know that we have and that we've even built it. That Hollywood storefront that is a total phony, a mask that is our personality, that is our persona. And we live out of that and we live a lie. No wonder we have tension. No wonder we have suffering in our lives, personally and as well as in relationships, because people and circumstances are not relating to the real me. They're relating to the Hollywood storefront. Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. Some of us once had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the problem, the fear problem, or any other. When it made us cocky, it was worse. You heard me talk in my discussion about my self-esteem and my pride in the third and fourth column. All I found having their roots primarily in that narcissistic personality. You could go to the step 6 material in the Way of Life document. In there is a page from the diagnostic manual of the psychiatrist and psychologist that lists the definition of a personality disorder and the 9 characteristics of a narcissist. That might be quite helpful at this point for you to take a look at, not because you are one, but because it's the profile of self-centeredness on steroids. Bill says on page 62 that our spiritual malady, our unmanageability, our cancer of the soul is self-centeredness. Well, an extreme example of that from a diagnostic standpoint is the narcissistic personality. That's why I put it in there, also because I relate to it, embarrassingly. So page 68. Perhaps there is a better way. We think so. So now he's going to get into the solution, very much like he did on pages 66 and 67 in the big book when he talks about the prayer for the removal of deep resentment. We're powerless. He's going to make the same point here about fear. For we are now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. Let's stop. Let's pause. Bill doesn't use words in frivolous nature. What's he trying to tell us here? Oh, in the third step, we made a decision to turn our will and our life over to the care of God, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. So he's just reminding us of the commitment we made in the third step. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. Well, you can turn that into a question. Do I trust God more than I trust myself? Do I even trust myself? My answer to both of those questions in 1991 was no. Even though my life was good, I was sober, I had had a spiritual awakening 3 years earlier by doing this work, I still didn't know that I didn't know, and I couldn't see that I didn't see that I had fear and the sources of it and the implications of it. A great contrast. Infinite God rather than our finite self. That's why we have fear. We're finite. We had a beginning, we have an end, and we have deficiencies. Everybody has some deficiencies. The next line is fabulous. We are in the world to play the role God assigns. I completely passed over that for years in step studies and book studies. And yet in 1991, when I'm going through the steps, this man focused on it with a searchlight. He said, turn that statement into a question. He was a great believer in taking statements from the big book and turning them into questions to unpack the statement. What is the role in this world for me that I've been assigned, whether you believe in God or not, or a life force or not, whatever reality means to you in terms of this God as we don't understand it, the Spirit with a capital S, the Creator with a capital C. What is it that we did that in step 2, and it may have changed a little bit for you, but revisit it. What's your destiny? Oh, these are not small questions. What's your purpose? What's your mission? What's your value? Why were you born? That's the implications of this question. There's not a easy answer, and there's not a glib answer, and there's not a right answer. There's just your answer. Put a big question mark in the margin of your big book. And if you don't have it there with you, make a note to do that. This is an exercise that I'm suggesting to you. A question. I'm not giving you an answer, and I'm not suggesting that you'll have an answer by the time you finish the fourth step. But I am suggesting that you have this question and you hold it through the entire process up through the ninth step. And I'd be very surprised if you don't have at least some suggestion of an answer to that question by the time you finish your ninth step. Not by the time you finish this workshop. I didn't say that. Unless, in fact, you finish your ninth step by the time you finish this workshop, which is highly unlikely. But by the time you finish the ninth step, I believe you'll have more than hints to the answer to that question. What is my role in this world? And the answer is so important. Hear this next sentence. See, this is why I'm emphasizing it so much, because of this next sentence. Just to the extent that we do as we think God would have us and humbly rely on God, does God enable us to match calamity with serenity. Well, that's a lot of words. It's a very dense statement. What does it mean? You want to be happy? Find out what your purpose is and do it. That's my translation, a simplistic translation, a simple translation. You want to be serene and live in harmony and contentment? Find out what your purpose is and do it. Be in alignment with your destiny. Yeah, this is pretty large concepts that we're exploring here. Just to the extent that we do, see, behaviorally, as we think God would have us, alignment with reality, alignment with the will of God, many phrases, and humbly rely on God, turn our life and our will over to the care. That's what we're talking about. Remember the GPS analogy from the third step? When we're in alignment, then the speed bumps of life are handled by our shock absorbers. It's a great analogy for us. We have tools that allow us to navigate life and reality as it emerges. Not smooth all the time. We know that. Each one of us sitting here knows that. Maybe recently even. But to the extent that we're in alignment with reality, in alignment with our consciousness, in alignment with our principles, steps 11 and 12, consciousness and 12 principles, to that extent, there's a flow. Let's continue. We never apologize to anyone for depending upon our Creator. We can laugh at those who think spirituality is the way of weakness. Paradoxically, it is the way of strength. The verdict of the ages is that faith means courage. You might remember how we unpack step 2 on page 53. God is or God isn't. What is your choice? God is or God isn't. What is your choice? The next line says, we are now confronted with the question of faith. And I spent some time with you over 2 different workshops, unpacking that in a dynamic that I hope helped you. It sure gave me an inside reverberation, resonance with the whole concept of faith. Faith is my decision. There's no knowledge or certitude there. There's no feeling or emotion there. It's just a plain and simple and empty decision. God is. My mind suggests that that's an appropriate decision because otherwise I'm lost because I don't have enough effective power. So my mind accepts this. That's my belief. But nothing happens until I act that way as if it's true. And my body cooperates in behavior, and that's trust. Faith is my decision. Belief is my acceptance. Trust is my action. And I have a dynamic that answers all of my questions every day. I act as if, no matter what I see, no matter what I think, no matter what I feel, no matter what I experience, I fall back on that. What decision did I make? Is there a God or isn't there? That's it. That's the safety net for me. As thin and dark as it is with no certitude, when I look back over my shoulder at that decision and the actions that follow from it on a, awkward and not consistent basis, but consistent enough, my life works. That's why Bill says faith requires courage. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God, meaning they act as if it's true. We never apologize for God. Instead, now here's a sentence that's completely different than the way he ended the prior paragraph. The prior paragraph was about behavior and doing. They trust their God. We never apologize for God. Instead, we let God demonstrate through us what God can do. We ask God to remove our fear and direct our attention to what he would have us be, not do, but be. The difference between action and essence. At once we commence to outgrow fear. But notice what he just said in the most simple way, with in resentment inventory, he spent a page and a half explaining powerlessness and the practice of prayer. Here he gives us a line or two. We ask him to remove our fear. We ask him. We ask God. A prayer. Anytime we're talking to God is a prayer. It's about the intention, not the words. I have a fear, I can name it. I can analyze it. I can analyze it to the exact nature, and I can understand it, and I can accept it. And I can talk about it even to somebody. And all of that might diminish it. All of that might change it. But for the deep ones, like the deep resentment, it doesn't. We're as powerless over our resentment as we are over alcohol. Bill said on page 66. Here he's implying the same thing. We're as powerless over our deep fears as we are over our addiction. We ask God to remove our fear and direct our attention to what God would have us be. That's really part of the reasoning behind the worksheet in the Way of Life document on fear, is to create the opposite of what our fear is. In that worksheet, I list in the first column the fear, and the second column why I have it. But the third column, which isn't coming out of the big book, is what behavior comes out of that fear. And then the next line, the fourth column, is, well, what would be the virtue, the courage that would be opposite the fear? And the fifth column is, what would be the behavior that comes from that virtue? So that even though I don't have it, I can envision it and have the intention of having that virtue as a replacement for the fear and having that behavior instead of the behavior that comes from my fear. So the paragraph above talks about doing, the action and the behavior. And the paragraph here talks about our very being, out of which our behavior flows. And he says at the end, a promise. This is the promise of the fear inventory. At once we commence to outgrow fear. It doesn't say at once the fear goes away. In fact, he says at once we commence. Commence means begin to outgrow fear. That's the fear inventory as I've experienced it, as I understand it. Now I'm looking for, well, let me just put something up here on the screen and see if there's something else I need to say about it from my PowerPoints. Make a list. Ask, why do I have it? And Bill tells us the reason is a lack of trust. It's really just that simple. It's not complicated. And then this is the fear worksheet. I'm sorry, I don't know how to straighten it out, but in your way of life document, you can turn it, and probably on your technology, you can turn it. I don't have that skill yet, but there's name the fear. Why do I have it? What behavior is manifest in that, out of that fear? And what would the virtue be? The opposite. The strength. Virtue comes from the Latin virtus, meaning the strength. The operating principle down deep in me. And then the final column is, and what behavior would come out of that so that I can have a vision of what it might look like if I didn't have that fear. In terms of shaping it, please do it the approach to the fear inventory with the suggestions that I'm giving you in the order that I'm giving it to you. So make the list, and you might want to sit more than once. And it's not about being perfect. You might have 10 or 20 or 100 or 500. The number is not important, but allow it to flow out to be what it is on scratch paper. And then pick out the 10, the 5 fears that are the major ones that diminish the quality of your life. I mean, it could be that you have a fear of driving on the freeway. At least in Southern California, that would be a very clear handicap. In New York, it wouldn't be. So make it relevant to you. That could be something that diminishes the quality of your life, some behavioral. I'm afraid of large groups. I'm afraid of going into open fields. I'm afraid of small rooms or claustrophobic. These could be, but I'm not thinking about a fear of snakes and a fear of insects and a fear of spiders. I mean, if it's ruining the quality of your life, yes, but let's get real. I have a fear of making a mistake. That's one of mine. I have a fear of public humiliation. Probably still with me. If you ever see me react in an unhealthy way, it's because I'm confronted, I wasn't prepared for it, I'm not spiritually fit, and I overreact because it's one of my buttons. Being embarrassed in public. So those are big ones for me. I'm not afraid of death. I am afraid of suffering between now and the time I die. I don't want that at all. So be real about it in your, and it's not here, please. If you have to, put your hand on your heart, like you did with the third column when you were looking at fear. Put your hand on your gut when you're doing this meditation, this review of what your fears are. This is not theoretical. This is not a memory. This is not a logic. This is not thought. Oh, I should be afraid of the plane crashing. Yeah. Are you? Well, I mean, if that's interfering with your life, then it's real if you don't get on planes. And it's an issue for you. Maybe you don't want to, don't need to. So make it real in terms of the quality of your life. We're looking for substantial fears. the fear of never finding your destiny, the fear of not finding a loving relationship, the fear of failure, sometimes the fear of success. Once again, there's no right or wrong answers. There's just your feelings. Don't pay much attention right now, please, to the worksheet in the Way of Life document. Later on down the road, you can work on that. But once you have identified probably a minimum of 10 and a maximum of 20 substantial fears from the list of all of your fears, you're welcome to work on as many as you want, obviously, but focus on 10 or 10 to 20 is the range. If you have as many as 10, if you have more than 20, then find out the ones that you want to work on and then spend some time in prayer. We have a tendency to slip into the question, well, why is that so? Or what will happen? Or why? Those are the wrong questions. I may have even said those questions, but last night I got a big insight into the unhelpfulness of those questions because it keeps you in your head. I mean, it's a place I'm comfortable with. I go to my head as a, what do you call that? A default position. But it's not helpful here. In a fear inventory, we need to be in our heart. Fear and emotion, not our logic, our syllogisms, our thinking, our reflection. No. We need to be feeling it, the fear, in our gut maybe. Some of us will have more of a predisposition to feel our feelings in our emotions surrounding the heart. Others, they're just different, not better or worse. They will feel the feelings in their gut, an instinctual thing rather than intuitive thing. But it's about feeling. And I have recommended many times people, put your hand on your heart. When you did the fear column in the third column, that right-hand side, I said, put your hand on your heart or over your stomach when you're asking yourself the question, and as a focus of your intention to come from there. And so the right question, well, the healthy question, the question that will prompt a deeper dive is, what feeling comes up when you say this fear? When you say this fear, what feeling of fear comes up? What feeling of fear comes up? What feeling of fear comes up as you walk down that spiral, cavern or labyrinth to try to unpack to the bottom of the source of the fear? And when you hit hard concrete, you stop and go on to the next one. Or if you find yourself just spinning, stop, go on to the next one. You might come to an answer like, oh, I see where the source of my fear comes from. Stop, go on to the next one. By the time you do 5, 10, certainly maybe 10, I've suggested that you do no more than 20 if you have that many. If you have more than 20, do up to 20 and do the substantial ones. It's all relative. You define what substantial means for you, because substantial for you might be different than for me. So tonight, then, I would like to hear from you, questions, concerns, comments, experiences with the fear inventory. Certainly that's the way I'd like to start out.
And I'm going over the fear. I put being successful as a fear.
All right.
Why do I feel I feel like it might take me away from home life, my duties at home, my responsibility as a wife.
All right. So did you write this out?
Yes.
I want you to read what you wrote, not make it up.
So being successful, like for number 2, why do I have it? I said it might take me away from my home life and family.
Did you unpack it or did you use the worksheet?
I have the worksheet.
I see. Okay. I do recommend people use the unpacking first and then the worksheet, but let's see what you wrote there in terms of what behavior goes with that.
For the behaviors, let's see, I get withdrawn and resentful.
Okay. All right. When you fear success, you withdraw from what?
From life. Like I start getting depressed and I.
Oh, okay. So you ensure failure then.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's very effective. If you fear success, you won't have it. That's great. Yeah. So you're on the track. I'm so glad that you saw the humor in that.
And this is why I feel like I'm here, because I am learning, because I hear others share, and then when I'm doing my stuff, it doesn't always make sense, and then you open your mouth and yeah, thanks.
Okay, all right. So what would be the virtue or strength if you didn't have this fear of success?
That I would have self-confidence and balance.
Yes, and then what behavior would go with that?
Happiness and success.
Yeah. It's really that simple, actually, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess.
But it's not. It didn't get underneath it to why you have the fear of success, or what are the fears underneath that? What does success has some type of negative meaning to you?
I wrote on a side piece.
Good.
The whys I have these is abandonment, neglect, worthlessness. I get fearful of jealousy in relationships, that it will turn into resentment, and that I will be put down. And
so you care a lot about what people think. Yeah. I mean, that's everything you just said had something to do with the way you would be judged by other people.
yes.
All right. Is that relevant in other areas of your life?
Yes.
I'll bet. All right. What 12-step fellowship are you in?
Alcoholics Anonymous.
All right. Yeah. Have you been at all in Al-Anon?
I dabbled for about a month.
And you dabbled, and what was your experience?
These people are crazy.
Okay. All right. So did you try a variety of meetings?
No, I did NA for almost 11 and a half years or so. And then I've been full on AA, sober for 10 months and 23 days.
Nice.
Thank you. So I just feel like because of these fears, like I overcompensate and I'm like the superstar,
Sure.
AA, but I think I really overcompensate. And I know that other people have shared, like they neglect like the easy stuff, like the house duties, things that seem basic, I don't have, and I have to work extra hard to do them. I don't feel
sort of life living skills type thing?
Yes.
Do you have a sponsor?
Yes.
Is that sponsor helpful in these areas?
Yes.
Great. Good.
Very.
Yep. Well, then, I'm going to take it back. It doesn't sound like you need Al-Anon right now. I mean, you might need it, and you might need it later on. I don't have an opinion about that. I really don't. Because what you've just said is that you're experimenting with abstinence in alcohol for less than a year. So you're kind of having a new experience.
Oh, yeah. I worked the NA steps, and I did it just to wham, bam, get me out of here. I'm done. And I lived my life by the seat of my pants. I don't know how the heck I stayed sober.
Right.
As long as I did, I feel like I quit it and I never looked back. But with alcohol, it was never, It wasn't a drug. And I certainly didn't have a problem with it.
Right.
I managed it very well. That I had balance, I had balance for that.
Right.
But
You're being facetious now, of course, right?
absolutely. And
just checking.
And that's on my list, is overcompensating and joking, because
It's okay to have a sense of humor. You have a really nice, solid sense of humor. Yeah, I don't see it as a smokescreen. I see it as authentic. Yeah.
Thank you. But yeah, I just, I know that I need Al-Anon. I can't take another.
No. Stay with what you're doing here. You've got a sponsor. You're newly in AA. You're doing this work. See what happens as a result of this work. Don't distract.
This has been magical. This has been magical.
Yeah, all right. This is awesome. There's so much more. So stay with this. Stay with this.
I will. Thank you. Thank you so much.
One of the reflections or epiphanies that I got out of the reading, it's not the alcohol. Well, I am powerless over alcohol, but I'm so powerless over my thoughts.
Yes.
And my fears. And it's like, I was thinking about the nature of the powerlessness, and it's absolutely crippling.
Yes.
And it all comes down to these fears I have. But then when I was just kind of like, I decided, oh, you know what? I'm just going to jot down a few fears as I'm going here, as he's talking, get my list started. And then I'm like, oh my God, if I look underneath these fears, it's all the same thing.
Oh.
And it all comes down to, I've written a lot of, screenplays and short stories, and I wrote a book, and they're all sitting on the shelf. And I'm like, well, why don't you try to publish it? And it's like, oh, you have a fear of success, or maybe you have a fear of failure. But what it really is I'm just afraid to let people see who I am.
That's very real. My very first book was a book of instructions. I had no problem with publishing that because it didn't represent any aspect of my personality other than my sense of organization. But the second book I published, which was a commentary on my experience, once it was printed and was going to be distributed, I had this chest caving fear. Oh my God, I've put myself out there now.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's that. And then if I go deeper, it's like, well, why am I afraid of that? It's because if people see the real me, I'll be abandoned.
Oh.
And if I go under that, keep on going down the why spiral, it's like, well, if I'm abandoned, I won't be part of community, which means I'll die alone.
Yeah. Whereas mine is a fear of being criticized and made fun of publicly. And I traced it back, because I was in therapy, to the verbal and emotional brutality of my father since I was 1 or 2 years old, until I left for the monastery at age 17. And I'm pretty confident now that was one of the unconscious motives, was to get out of his shooting range.
Then I'm sitting here thinking, how ironic is it that a lot of my resentments are if people don't see me, like if my boss compliments somebody else publicly for something that I'm the exact same thing that I've been doing all along.
Right. Yeah.
It's just a huge irony.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see it. It's interesting to sort of like allow it to unwind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then once we name it, the energy goes out of it. One of the recommendations early on in the meetings that I was going to in my second year, like of sobriety, as I was learning how to listen, was they said, when you have fear, stop and face it and walk toward it. And I thought, that's crazy talk. And yet that's exactly right. I have found that when I face my fear. I walk toward it. I look it directly in the eye. It shrivels because it's not real. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that we're gonna work on the fear column because I do have a current fear of driving and it's really affecting the quality of my life.
Yeah.
Today, I was about to call my new job. I drove half of the way and I walked the other half of the way to get to work. So on my way back, I got lost because I had the fear that I had to drive again.
Yeah.
So, but I'm so glad that you are talking about that, and I hope to go under this fear because it's really, really affecting my life.
Yeah.
Because that comes along with the other fear that is like, you know what, how I'm going to support myself if I don't go to work.
Well, yeah. No, I'm
So,
pretty connected. Yeah. So it's a very real life situation. And by the way, I don't, well, there are behavioral psychologists, meaning a specifically trained person that can intervene if in fact you engage somebody and you follow their direction. It's phobias like that are very easy to change.
I hope I can get to the bottom of this fear because I need to go to work and I need to support myself. So thank you. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you. Very practical. Yep.
Hi, Herb.
Hi.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I just wrote about one fear, and this is a huge fear, and it kind of paralyzes me and kind of keeps me in a smaller place in my life. I have a fear of entertaining people at my place when it's just me and not someone with someone else.
Yeah.
And I'm the question why. If people don't have a good time, I'll feel really uncomfortable and judged. And then after that, why? I will feel shy and awkward entertaining alone. From that, I like meeting people outside my house because I can leave when I want to.
Right.
Why? I'm not self-confident when the spotlight is on me. Why? I hide behind other people. Why? I'm insecure. Why? I don't feel comfortable in this situation. Why? I'm not grounded in myself when I'm entertaining by myself. Why? I am imagining the worst, future forecasting, and why I don't feel good enough.
Yeah. So the question why did work for you though.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I mean, that worked wonderfully for you. You kept digging a little bit deeper, although there was a bit of a spiral there. Did you hear the synonyms?
No.
Take a look at it and see where there might be 2 or 3 words that are saying the same thing.
Yeah. Shy, self-confident, insecure, those things. You know?
Yeah, those things.
But that's the truth. And I'm really actually a pretty outgoing person. And I love socializing and I'm good one-to-one or even with a party. But to invite people to my house is crippling. I can't do it unless somebody else is here doing it with me.
All right.
And so that's one.
Is that a fear that diminishes the quality of your life?
I think so.
Oh, okay. All right. See, my decision on that basis was if I felt that way, I would just go to parties. I would never have one.
Yeah. Well, I want like when I meet people I like,
Right.
I want to say, come over and I'll make you dinner or something, but I can't.
Right.
And I hate it.
Yeah, right. No. Well, what do you see as the 1 or 2 central fears here?
Feeling judged.
Yeah, but that's on the surface. Yes. So what if you're judged?
I don't feel like I present myself the best in that. I get nervous.
That's another smoke screen for what?
For
why do you hide?
Well, because I don't feel good enough.
That's it. Those were the synonyms that I heard echoing. Different words, but the meaning was the same. I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough. They'll see through the veil. And
Yeah.
what's your fear there? What fear comes up when you heard those words I just say?
That I'm not a good cook.
Oh,
You know, I just thought of my dad loved to entertain, and they had big parties. And like for 3 days before a party, my mother would have like a nervous breakdown. She hated it.
yeah.
And it was family chaos. And I'm just wondering if that could be that I adopted that, because I don't have the equivalent of my father to run the show. And maybe I adopted that from her, and just, I don't know, but it's real.
Okay.
It's real in me.
So what would, yes, I hear it. And I think you're exploring it in a healthy way. Did I have this modeled for me by my mother and I've just picked it up consciously or unconsciously? Great question. Or do I just feel unworthy and not competent?
Right.
So, but see, most of those are very fixable things. I'm not going to try to fix you, although everything in me wants to fix you right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what's the bottom line fear here for you? Did you see something that you could say 1 or 2 words that would capture it?
Being grounded. I don't feel grounded. I feel like I'm kind of
Okay.
like
So
really nervous. And
yeah.
I don't know why. I just,
Yeah. Well, no, you do know why.
because I'm,
Well, no,
I don't feel good enough.
Yeah. You don't feel competent on your own.
Right. Yes.
That was the bottom line, and you use many words for it. But did you happen to use the worksheet then in the Way of Life document to try to get to the other side of it?
No, I should though. No, I
No,
didn't.
no, don't be shitting on yourself. Let's do it. Let's do it right now. So you have a fear. I can give you the verbal. Let me lead you through it.
Okay.
You have a fear of entertaining at home. Why do you have that? Because I don't feel competent. I don't feel worthy on my own.
Yeah.
What behavior does that show when you have done it?
I get nervous.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
My tummy's tight. I hate it. My heart's all, negative.
Like long before the actual event.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like you said with your mother, 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
By the way, that was a great insight, I think,
True.
personally. And okay, so if you didn't have this, what would the virtue be? What would the strength be? What would the courage be?
If I didn't have this fear of
Yeah.
not feeling like enough,
Yeah.
what would the courage be?
You said it already a little bit before we started this unpacking.
That I don't feel good enough?
No. But what would the virtue be? The strength?
Oh, the strength would be to have people over that I like.
No, that's a smoke screen also. No, because it has nothing to do with them. It has everything to do with you. You said something about standing or something. You said something about yourself holding.
Yeah. Well, I said I'm not self-confident when the light is on me.
No, that wasn't what I heard. You said
I
something.
hide behind others.
Mhm.
I'm not grounded in myself.
That's it. That grounded. I love that word because that's where you find your strength, is to get grounded.
Right.
When you're grounded in yourself and confident, feeling worthy, then how would you behave?
I wouldn't have the anxiety.
Yeah, correct.
I would just figure out what I was going to make and enjoy myself.
Yeah. Would you ask for help?
Probably not.
Oh. Okay.
Unless, well, my best friend died last year, and she was always somebody that if I wanted to do something with somebody, she was a good cook. She'd come over once in a while. Yeah. And with her, I could do it, but she's gone. And there's nobody right now, there is really nobody in my life that I could ask to do that.
All right. So the point here is for you then to see that you don't feel very grounded in yourself. And that's
Right.
what the suggestion in the big book is. Number one, you identify the underlying nature of it. I'm not grounded. I don't feel good enough. And then you pray for the whatever you need to do to be grounded. But also this turnaround document would say that you need to learn and practice the behavior as if you were grounded, so that over time you will decondition whatever this condition relationship is that you may have picked up from your mother.
Yeah.
You know, so don't invite 30 people over your first time.
No, I wouldn't. Even to have 2 people over.
Well, then invite 1 or 2 people and tell them up front before they ever come there on the phone, I'm inviting you, but I'm really uncomfortable, and you're my guinea pigs. I'm going to practice on you.
Okay. I'll try it.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, I'll do it. And because I want to get over this, I
Yeah.
really like make my place look nice. And I think, and then I have nobody, unless there's some random thing,
Yeah.
my son with some friends or whatever, have to get something. But yeah, I want to get over that. So I'll pray.
Well,
And,
I'd hate to use myself as a reference, but it's just come to me, and I don't believe I've ever shared this before. I got sober when I was 43. I got awakened when I was 48. And by the time I was 50, all right, I was in pretty solid shape. Before age 50, my job was a sales manager, and I hated presentations. Can you imagine me hating presentations?
no.
No, it makes no sense. Look at this. I mean, I almost have to be careful that I don't get addicted to presenting because I love it so much.
Yeah. Well, I know that you can get over things, because when I first started in Al-Anon, I could not share.
Oh,
I was the person in the room that never shared. That was
And how did you
start doing that.
Yes.
My desire to get better was stronger than my shyness.
And the desire prompted what?
For me to speak up, because I knew if I didn't speak up, nobody in the room would know my story, so no one could relate to me.
So you began practicing speaking up.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I got to just go for it. And
Well, but in muy poco, as we say in Southern California, very small steps.
okay, I'll try it.
Well,
It just brings up anxiety even thinking about it. Really does.
yeah,
I hate it.
yeah,
So, okay.
yeah, yeah. It's a progressive practice, and start really small with really close friends that will laugh and have a good time about all of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So I did end up trying to solve the problem. Thank you.
I have fear of doing this.
All right.
Um,
What is this?
well, I wrote down a fear and a few answers to why. I need help. Anyways, I have fear my boyfriend will leave me. Why? Because he might find someone better. Why? Because I am not good enough. And I also wrote why, because my dad, quote unquote, abandoned me. A lot of people have told me that over the years, so I just put that down because they kind of correlate the two. But when I get the feelings, I get like, I feel terror, I feel paralyzed, and then I also act out like a army sergeant towards him. Like, what are you doing? What's that? What's this? What's going on? Who's she? Why are you talking to her?
Yeah, that's gonna make sure he sticks around you.
Yeah, I know. I'm doing the exact.
That's right. Your behavior is going to create your worst fear.
Yeah.
You see that, right? Did I lose
I see it because you're saying it.
Well, no, you said it though. I just heard what you said.
Hmm.
Is that an endearing quality for you to point out to him the drill sergeant attitude?
Not at all.
Well, yeah. It
And
hard.
it's harming the relationship.
Yes. There's no way it could foster a quality relationship. That's correct. So, but go with your what you wrote there. Read what you wrote. It seems
So-
like the why question is actually helping you also. So keep unpack it for us, please.
Well, I wrote because he might find someone better, because I am not good enough,
Yeah,
because my dad abandoned me.
yeah. Anything else?
Because when I act out on this fear, I'm afraid I'm making it worse. Like
Is that something that you wrote down, or you just made up now based on this conversation?
No, I just made up now.
That's I heard that. Yeah,
Okay.
and it is true. So, what fear comes up when you say this behavior that you act out this behavior? What fear comes up?
When I act like a drill sergeant, quote unquote,
Yes.
what fear comes up?
What feeling of fear comes up right now?
Panic, terror. Are you asking feelings?
Well, but those are just synonyms, so those are not helpful.
Okay. What feelings come up when I feel the fear?
Let me try this. I'll ask you a question. So if your boyfriend leaves you tomorrow, what fear does that generate in you right now? Fear. Don't think it through. Feel it.
Panic?
I can't hear you.
Panic?
I'm not hearing that. What is the word?
Panic.
Oh, panic. Well, okay, but that's just another term for fear. All right. So let's assume that he leaves you tomorrow. You know he's going to leave you today. You know that tomorrow, and you're panicking right now. What fear does that bring up?
Abandonment?
All right. And if you are indeed abandoned tomorrow, the moving van shows up. He has movers there. He's completely moved out. And you get to pay the rent or whatever else is left, and he's not going to discuss it with you. What fear comes up? Now,
Financial
all right.
insecurity?
It doesn't take long to have a fear. So you're trying to think about what the fear is rather than feel the fear. Financial, yes, you'll be financially disadvantaged. And when you feel that financial pinch, what fear comes up?
I can't do it.
You can't do what?
I can't do it alone.
Okay, that's what comes up. Good, excellent. I can't do it. And when you really see the truth of that I cannot do this, I cannot live life on my own, what fear comes up?
I can't be alone.
All right, let's go. I'm going to be alone tomorrow, and I anticipate for the next year that I'll be abandoned and alone and financially destitute. What fear comes up?
That I'll die.
Okay, I mean, you jumped right to it. Really, is that a fear, or is that just a logical conclusion?
Probably logical.
Yeah, that would be my sense of it. It doesn't feel like a fear to me. You up till now, you've been really, incrementally unpacking the fear.
So everything sucks, and now what's my fear?
Yeah.
that life will suck. That
All right. Yep. All right. So you pushed it a little bit further. All right. What would you say would be what you learned from the experience of both writing it out on your own and now talking it out with me? What's your conclusion about the source of your fear?
the conclusion about the source of my fear.
Yep.
When you say the source of my fear, what does that mean?
Where does it come from in you?
My head?
No.
No.
What's the source of it, the origin of it? What's creating this fear in you? What about you creates this fear in you of being destitute?
That I'm not good enough.
Yeah. I'm incompetent. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not educated enough. I'm not fast enough.
Pretty enough.
I don't
Skinny enough.
say it again.
Pretty enough. Skinny enough.
Oh, okay. All right. There you go. All right. Yep. All right. So now I'm pretty confident you haven't done this, and that is that worksheet in the Way of Life document. You might want to try that and see what would it look like on the other side of it if you didn't have this fear. If he could leave you and you would be heartbroken and there would be an adjustment, but you would survive and you would, in fact, live your life and move on to a new relationship. And so try to get into the mindset where you develop that scenario in terms of what courage or strength do you need and what behavior would that look like as the opposite of this fear position where you're totally stuck and life sucks.
I see. So play it out. Or do the positive.
Do you want to just live in the fear?
No, not at all. I'm just trying to,
Right.
not at all, no.
Right. And so like we did with the fourth column, there needs to be a turnaround here. That's why I think the benefit of that worksheet in the Way of Life document, it helps at least theoretically propose a solution to the fear other than what's in the big book, which is a little simplistic. It says, pray for the removal of the fear. Wonderful, I agree, but there's some psychology that needs to be done in the meanwhile in terms of your dealing practically with the fear.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when I get to the turnaround, it should be that this fear happened or,
Well, no, you have the fear.
okay.
You have
No,
the
but that it actually happened. That's what I,
It doesn't matter whether it's going to actually happen or not. You have
okay.
the fear. And your fear is creating that it's actually going to happen because of your fear.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's what you started out with saying.
No, it's true. And that scares me too. That's
Well,
another.
I mean, what would be the solution to that for you right now?
To do the other half of the worksheet.
Yeah, I don't want to be, well, I'm not, I was going to be something I'm not, but, and say words that I don't normally use, but I'll just say, stop being a nag.
Okay. No, I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah.
I thought it might be worse than that.
Oh, the word I have in mind is worse.
Oh, okay.
That's why I monitored this. Oh, thank you for laughing.
I want to talk about a fear.
Yes.
And I realized that fear really is just an excuse for another fear. So like I have this fear that no matter what I'll do, I'll never have enough.
Yes.
But it's really not the fear that's sitting under there. So when I said, okay, so why is, I like that, so ask myself, so why? And then keep going, why and why? And the bottom is that I will have to adapt myself to my reality. That means I'll have to change instead of sitting here, continuing childish behavior, which is like overspending and expecting somebody to come and save me out of this some terrible disaster that I put myself into.
Right.
So there's so many stories that I have in my head because I was so deprived as a child, and somebody's got to save me.
Yeah.
And it's uncomfortable. It's so uncomfortable, and the fear is that I'll have to change.
Yeah.
That is really my fear.
There you, yeah. Well, yes, but what's underneath that? Then that's a rhetorical question. So don't stop there. It's a good discovery, but maybe there's something underneath that. Why are you afraid of change?
When I look into that, is that I won't be able to maintain that change. I'll change. That's my experience. I'll change, but then I'll go back to my comfortable old behavior. I won't be able to maintain it.
Yeah. Well, keep
Then
continuing.
I suffer. And then I'll
But
suffer.
I'm saying this to you as a teaching moment for everybody. Don't be satisfied with just this answer. Push it. Well, what would happen if that happened? Well, what would happen if that happened? Well, what am I afraid of? If that happens, what will happen? And keep pushing it and keep pushing it and keep, so I'll die. That's not the end, maybe. What are you afraid of? Death. What's on the other side? Are you afraid of? Well, maybe there is no God. All right. Well, what's that fear about? What fear is there if, let's assume that there is no God? What fear does that bring up? I mean, I'm just doing that artificially. I'm not saying that that's a real iteration, but don't settle until you feel like you can't. You hit a wall and you can't go any further, or it becomes spiral, or it becomes redundant. I didn't say that earlier in the instructions, but if once you hit the bottom, then go on to the next one. Once you hit a spiral, go on to the next one. Once you become redundant, go on to the next one. Because after you do 3, 5, 10 of them, you will begin to go, oh, I see some sort of a pattern here. Yeah, that's the end of a comment I should have made a lot earlier.
Yeah.
Makes sense? Yeah.
Yeah, because what I'm beginning to see as I list those fears, and as I keep going in and in, and I keep getting to the same place.
Yeah. Well,
it's kind of to that point.
That might be the answer then. That might very well be the answer. And let it be for a little bit, but keep open in the set aside attitude. Yeah.
And I've done quite a few of the fears of the deep dive, and a lot of them are ending with "I'll die." And after hearing you talk to the other person, I'm wondering if I've just drawn that conclusion.
Well, what did you see just before you died?
What did I see? Well, like what I'm looking at right now is I can't breathe.
All right. So that's a physical discomfort as a result of the fear. Sure. Yeah. All right. But what happens if, in fact, that's a prolonged experience? What fear comes up?
If I can't breathe,
Mm-hmm.
that I'm going to die. That it hurt.
Or I'm going to suffer.
Yes.
Like I'm going to die, and I actually won't die. I'm just going to suffer.
Right. That's a good point. That's a good point.
Well, I don't have any fear of death. I mean, it's done.
Right. I didn't think I did either. That's why I was surprised.
But I don't want to suffer.
Right. Right. Okay. Then maybe that's how most of these end.
Well, give me a sampling, read across in terms of the kinds of fears that you unpacked. What kind of fears did you look at?
What I've written about so far, the one I was just talking about was having a fear of being controlled or told what to do. I fear public humiliation. I fear being old and incapacitated. I have a fear of relapse in my food program and overeating myself to death.
Yep.
Um,
Did you, when you unpack that, did you see any type of a common pattern toward the end of the before you died?
well, like for the one about fearing relapse and overeating myself to death, it was, I will be stuck, I will get fatter, I will get diabetes and heart disease, I'll get sicker and sicker, I'll become incapacitated, I'll need people to care for me, I will die.
Okay, all right. So, I mean, it's a feeling, it's also kind of a logical thing in terms of, so now what do you do with that?
But you know what? I think you're right. Like where I'll need people to take care of me. And if I think about if I'm incapacitated and I need people to take care of me, that's my definition of suffering.
Oh my God, absolutely.
So
Torture.
that's really what it is that I'll suffer.
All right. So then again, I'm going to refer you, like I have other people, to the worksheet now that you've done that, to see how do you resolve that? I mean, I'm not looking to do that right now, but
Right.
I'm asking you to ask yourself, how do I resolve that? Number one is do the worksheet to see what gets on the other side. It sounds like maybe getting on the other side is having some at least financial plan, recognizing the possibility of what you fear.
And I do.
Well, there you go.
And some of these, when I read where the end is, I will die, I don't believe it. I think, well, that's not true. Why did you write that there?
Well, then, you know, it might be true and it might not be true, but challenge it and see if there's anything in between then.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thanks.
I have a question, and it's about the fear. So how do we get I got your point about how if we want to be happy, we need to find our purpose, and we need to find what God would have us be. And like, how do we get there?
Yeah. Yeah, by continuing to ask that question and in prayer, and to ask sponsors and your close confidants, wonderful, and to pay attention to how your life is manifesting. I did not know what my real purpose was. I finished the steps for the third time with this question in mind. I finished in 1996. And my wife's sponsor, a woman, came to me. And she said, Herb, we have no women in the South Bay area that can help other women with step work. And I know you don't work with women. You've heard my story before. Would you do a workshop? I said, well, that's pretty innovative. I don't know. I'll talk to my sponsor. I'll talk to my spiritual director. I'll talk to Mary and see, what the lay of the land looks like in terms of both my ego as well as my time. And obviously, everybody agreed that I would do that. And it was an experiment. But at the end of that 2-year first workshop, 1998, I discovered I had a facility for it, a competency for it. Well, the rest is history. But I did not know that I could write a book. I did not know I could teach a class. I did not know that I could facilitate this message to a group of people effectively over a year or a year and a half period. And once I had about 3 workshops under my belt, I realized I had been delivered into my ministry, my purpose. So I don't know. I mean, all I can share is I didn't know where I was going, but I was operating on principle of being the best person I could be, praying for some direction and guidance to be in alignment with God's will, or at least with the flow of my life in the universe, and blah.
Right.
And you used the word congruence.
Right.
whether it's helping a lot of people visibly or a few people, it doesn't make any difference. But the congruence and the passion, that's what makes it. And it's a process that comes together, I believe, over time.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah, it's helpful in sensing, in painting the biggest picture conceptually and the dynamics of it. It's not helpful to say, oh, you need to do boom, boom, boom. No, but what you're doing, of course, are you a better person today than you were 3 years ago?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think so.
Yeah, well, but that's important that you think it, but you also know it. You know
Right.
it.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to be humble. Yeah.
Yeah. Good luck with that. You know, I'm thinking of a wonderful question. I've never had an opportunity to answer it that way. Thank you. But I'm also thinking here about the journey from 1998 backwards. And I could see my destiny was to be a professional good worker, that I was good at what I do with integrity, to be a decent husband with fidelity and integrity, to be a loving, caring, guiding father for a period of time. So it wasn't like there was this macro plan of, no, it was like, how in my stages of life am I going to be a good fit? Yeah, that really has to be as part of that entire, it's not just something that happens at the end of your life or at the end of a journey. No, it's like the entire journey is part of your destiny. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really great. That, you want to be a good friend, you want to be a good
There.
father, you want to be a good employee, a good boss. I guess whatever role you're having.
Yeah.
And okay,
Yeah.
I like that. I mean, that's very palpable, very reachable, rather than looking for this purpose that is like evading us. Yeah.
And I could even take it back, and I will be doing more thinking on it. This has been a very productive conversation for me, but to be a loving person. That's my destiny, is to be a loving person manifested in the immediate presence of my current reality.
That's beautiful.
Well, I didn't know it until this moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I hadn't reflected and put in all those pieces together, because it keeps it really simple.
Right.
Yeah, thank you so much. So we're moving on. Next week, I'm asking you to do assignment 16, the reading part. Assignment 16 is the sex inventory. I'll unpack it next Tuesday. I'm not asking you to do anything other than the reading. There's a lot of commentary in the assignment. You don't need to pay much attention to that. Item number 1 is the heart of this assignment for next week. Read pages 68 to 70. It's 2 pages, but it's less than 2 pages, but it's over those 2 pages, 68 to 70. Read and highlight. I suggest you do it more than once so that you kind of digest it a little bit, so that when I unpack it line by line, word by word, it'll make a lot more sense to you. You don't need to listen to anything. You don't need to read anything else. Just those 2 pages. You don't need to make any lists. I mean, you're welcome to do anything you want. But we do it by the numbers, and then we'll do like we did with the fear inventory. We'll spend a couple workshops on unpacking it. So please join me in this prayer of transformation, setting wonderful vision for us, for an alternative perception. Lord, make me a channel of your peace, that where there is hatred, I may bring love, that where there is wrong, I may bring the spirit of forgiveness, that where there is discord, I may bring harmony, that where there is error, I may bring faith, truth, that where there is doubt, I may bring faith, that where there is despair, I may bring hope, that where there are shadows, I may bring light, that where there is sadness, I may bring joy. Lord, grant that I may seek rather to comfort than to be comforted, to understand than to be understood, to love than to be loved. For it is by self-forgetting that one finds, it is by forgiving that one is forgiven, it is by dying that one awakens to eternal life. Amen. Thanks, everybody. You'll find that this fear inventory goes relatively fast, quickly, because it's far less analytical.